Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I like to say, call Allah, like how about Shalom Mashiach Yahushai. Necessary all praises to the Most High God Yahweh. There's only begotten Son Yahushai, who the world and calls Jesus Christ, right? So, the soldier God Sean coming at you with another sit down. Lord willing, it's edifying and it exhorts the brothers and sisters to stay in the spirit, knowing the times that we're in. So, I thought it was well due to make this video to exonerate, to boost the brothers and sisters' faith into this truth and to strive for the truth unto death. Matter of fact, let's get that right, because in the times where we're in and the times where we're about to enter, it's well important to stay in the truth and to stay focused and to know what it is we're in this truth for, right, and to be motivated. So, and this is the book of Sirach, chapter 4 and verse 28. Strive for the truth unto death, right? So that's what we should be striving for, right? That's what we should be staying focused on. Strive for the truth unto death, and the Lord shall fight for thee. That's what we got to do, man. We got to be able to give our life. We got to be willing to give our lives for this, man. As Yahushua said, man, who's willing to lose his life for me shall gain it. Who's willing to save his life will lose it, right? So we got to be able to, we got to be willing to lose our life, man. We got to forsake ourselves. We got to stand stiffly. Matter of fact, let's get that. This is the book of 2nd Esdras, right? Chapter 13, verse 54, right? For thou hast forsaken thine own way, right? So that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to forsake our own way, right? We're supposed to not do the things that we want to do. We're supposed to not do the things that bring us pleasure, right? Forsake thy own way and apply thy diligence unto my law, and that's what we're supposed to do. That's the truth. That's the thing which we should be striving for unto the death, right? The truth, keeping the laws, that's commandments, and having faith in Yahweh, Yahushai. That's what we're supposed to be striving to death for, right? Apply thy diligence unto my law and sought it, right? Thy life hast thou ordered in wisdom and hast called understanding thy mother, right? Therefore I have shewed thee. But that's it on that, right? So that's what we should be doing. We should be standing stiffly for the Most High. We should be forsaking our own way. We should be fighting to the death for the truth, right? We should be putting our lives on the line for this truth, right? Because we're going to get an incorruptible crown. But that's just the overall arching of it. But what I wanted to focus on is remembering the acts of our forefathers, right? Remembering how they acted in the face of adversity to boost us, right? So let's get that in 2nd Maccabees, right? So this is the book of 2nd Maccabees, chapter 6, verse 12. Now I beseech thee that those that read this book, right, those that look at these scriptures, right, those that look at the stories that are written in it, the history that's contained in these stories about our forefathers, right, they're beseeching us, right? Let's see what are they're beseeching us for, that they be not discouraged from these calamities, right? So when we see these things, when we see, oh, the nuclear warhead, the nuclear weapons that's about to hit, when we read those things in the scriptures, we shouldn't be discouraged. We shouldn't be afraid, right? When we read those things that are happening, we shouldn't be afraid, right? Let's read on. But they judge these punishments to be not for our destruction, but for the chastening of our nation, right? So when we read these things, we shouldn't think of it for our destruction, right? We shouldn't think of it for it to destroy us, right? But for our chastening as a nation, to build us up as a nation, right? To try us as a nation, right? To sift us, right? So yeah, that's what we should be looking forward to. That's what we should be looking for, right? So it shouldn't be we shouldn't be afraid, right? When we read these things should be boosting us, like how when Daniel was in a lion's den and he wasn't scared and the Most High delivered him. He had faith. When we read things in the scriptures that says that, it should boost our faith. It should let us know that the Most High won't ever let us look stupid, right? When we have faith in him, the Most High won't ever let us be confounded. Let's get that inside, right? So when we read stories about our forefathers being afflicted, let's look at what they did, right? Let's look at how they handled it, right? So that's how we should be handling ourselves as well, right? So this is the book of Sirach, chapter 2, verse 10. Look at the generations of old and see, did any ever trust in the Most High and was confounded, right? Look at the generations of old. Look at King David. Look at King Solomon. Look at Abraham. Look at Isaac. Look at all of our predecessors, right? Look at all of our forefathers and ask yourself, whichever one of them ever trusted in the Most High and was ever let down? Which one ever trusted in the Most High and ever regretted it? None of them. So in the times that we're in, right, we got to look at what's going on and we got to relate it back to the Most High, right? We got to Matter of fact, let's get that in Isaiah, right? What the stability of the times is. So this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 33, verse 6, right? And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of the times, right? So when we read these books, they're supposed to make us gain wisdom, right? As it says in Psalms 19:7, right? It converts the soul, makes wise the simple, right? These laws are supposed to make us wise. So when we read these things, when we read this history contained in the law, statutes, and commandments, contained in the prophets, it should boost us. It should exonerate us, because we're looking at the acts that our forefathers did, right? We are looking at the faith that they had in the level of faith that they had in the Most High, and they weren't confounded for it, right? They were made that much better. They were immortalized, so to speak, in the scriptures, because it's 2,000 years, 3,000 years later, and we're still talking about it, because they show that much level of faith that we're still talking about it, right? So none of our forefathers that ever trusted in the Most High was ever confounded for it, right? None of our forefathers that ever trusted in the Most High was ever lived or has ever regretted it, right? So we should take note from them, right? We should do what they do, right? We shouldn't buckle in the face of adversity, right? Because it's not for our chastisement, it's for our destruction. And how we overcome that is by looking at our forefathers and how they overcame it, like I said earlier, right? So let's go back to Sirach 2:10. Look at the generations of old, and look, did any ever trust in the Most High and was confounded, or did any abide in his fear and was forsaken? Or did any ever despise that called upon him, right? Or Slacky, let's read that again. Or whom did he ever despise that called on him, right? So who did the Most High whoever called in the Most High in righteousness and in earnestness, that was ever despised for, that was ever forsaken for? You can't name me not one. You can't. So that's how we overcome it. Let's look at the generations of old that did things in righteousness on the right hand side of things, and let's follow suit after them, right? Scripture says, follow not the multitude to do wickedness, but we can follow the multitude to do righteousness, right? To live in accordance with the scriptures, right? So we got to look to the generations of old, and we got to see what our forefathers did to earn favor with the Most High. We got to follow suit after them. That's how we gain life, right? So I'm going to read on to verse 11. Verse 11, for the Lord is full of compassion and mercy, long suffering, and very pitiful, and forgives sins and saves in times of affliction, right? So in times of affliction, in the olden times of affliction, right? The Most High, we're talking about the Most High God who loved us so much that he sent his only begotten Son to die for us, right? That's the same God we're talking about. He loved us that much that he wouldn't forsake us. He loved us that much that he sent his only begotten Son to die for us. That's the type of God that we're talking about. He's long suffering and his mercy is everlasting, right? So we got to have faith, and we got to see what our forefathers did, because that's the whole message of this sit down that I'm doing right now. Look into the generations of old and doing what they did, right, to earn favor with the Most High. Look into the generations of old and following after their footsteps in the righteous works that they did, right? Having faith in the Most High and striving for the truth unto death, right? That's what they did. So let's get one. Call to the remembrance what acts our forefathers did in their time, right? So call to the remembrance the acts that our forefathers did, right? Call to the remembrance how Moses had faith in the Most High, right? When he was seen in a burning bush, he could have been like, you know what, I must be going insane, and just walked out. But nah, he had faith, right? He had faith. Call to remembrance Abraham when he went to sacrifice up his son without a hesitation, because that's what the Most High required of him, right? Or call to remembrance those acts like that, right? And walk circumspect and walk sideways parallel, right? Walk parallel to those acts, right? Walk in the principle of those acts, right? Walk in the faith of those acts, right? What acts our forefathers did in their time, so shall you receive great honor and everlasting name, right? So that goes back to what I said earlier about their names being sort of immortalized because of the faith that they had, right? So we gotta call to remembrance the names of our forefathers, right? We gotta call to remembrance the acts of our forefathers, right? How they lived in accordance with the Most High, how they lived to please Him, right? King David was a man after the Most High's heart, because he walked in the law, statutes, commandments, and when he sinned, he repented immediately. That's what we gotta do, right? We gotta call to remembrance the righteous acts that our forefathers did and walk circumspect, right? We gotta call to remembrance the faith that they had, right? The strength of courage that they had to not blink in the face of adversity, no matter what they were going through. And they were going through some stuff. They were going through persecution. They were going through affliction, like the disciples. The disciples died professing the truth. That's what we got to do. We got to strive for the truth unto death. We got to follow their examples, right? Because there's a saying, right? The, the new generation has to surpass the older generation, right? So it's our duty to do more than what our forefathers did. So we can't do less than. So if they did those great acts, we have to go above and beyond that, right? So we have to go above and beyond that. We got to do even better. We got to do even greater. We got to go even harder. We have to strive even harder, and that's what we're trying to do in these times. That's what's needed in these times, right? So just following the logic here, right? If scriptures calls the time that we're about to enter so hard that nobody else has ever seen it, right? Nobody else has ever went through anything like it, right? So if nobody else has ever went through anything like it, but our forefathers were striving hard, that means we have to go even harder, because the time that we're entering into, we're harder than those time that they were in, that they were striving for. So you get what I'm saying? So they strove hard in the time that they were in, but we're about to enter an even harder time. So we have to strive even harder. We have to go above and beyond, literally. Matter of fact, let's see if I can find that this precept. Right. So this is the book of 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 17. Verse 18, Salakia. And if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner be saved? Right? So the times that we're about to enter, the righteous will be scarcely saved, right? So scarcely means barely saved. We're gonna be barely saved, right? We're gonna make it by the skin of our teeth. So that means we have to strive even harder, right? So it's not just gonna be, oh, I'm chilling and then I just made it. No, it says you're gonna barely make it. You're gonna strive as hard as you can, and even then you're gonna barely make it. You're gonna make it by the skin of your teeth, right? And the times where we're about to enter, no man has ever seen before. No man has ever encountered times as hard as we're about to encounter. So we have to strive harder than the older generation, right? Because if we don't, we're not going to be saved, right? We have to strive as hard as we can, and then some, and then we'll be scarcely saved, even then, if we're lucky, right? And so that's the thought process, if that makes sense to you. We have to strive even harder. We have to go even harder, right? Let's go back to that first Maccabees 2, right? Verse 52, was not Abraham found faithful in temptation and was imputed unto him for righteousness? So yeah, right? We have to strive even harder. We got to go even harder, right? So that's how we earn ourselves an everlasting name. That's how we get found in righteousness, when we resist them, when we resist sin and strive for the truth unto death. That's how we get an everlasting name, right? So that's how we got to do, man. We got to look to the generations of old and follow after their paths and follow after their conversation, right? Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 7, right? Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will shew thee. Ask thy elders, and they will tell thee. And who's our elders? Our predecessors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And how are they going to tell us? Well, it's written in the scriptures. It's recorded, right? That's how we ask them when we're going through something. We refer back to the text. How would Father Abraham have handled this, right? How would Father Isaac have handled this? How would King David have handled this, right? That's how we walk after them, right? Because they were men of righteousness. They were men that had attained an everlasting name. They were men after the Most High's own heart, right? They were men that the Most High himself has called his friends, right? So if we want to be counted like them, right, it only makes sense that we follow after them, right? It only makes sense that we follow in their footsteps, right? That we did what they did, right? So let's read that again. Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will shew thee, right? Ask our forefathers, and they will tell you, right? Right? Everything, the scriptures has everything you ever need. The scripture, it will answer every one of your questions if you just know how to ask and where to look, right? It will answer it. There's like 4 whole different books dedicated to wisdom, how to live your life. It has everything you need. You're not lacking. Written by our forefathers, right? So that's how we ask them. That's how we ask them how to live, and they will show us, man. They'll show us, right? You just gotta know where to ask and how to ask, and ask in earnest, not so you can pray upon it, not so you can look good to others. You gotta ask in earnest, to do the will of the Most High, right? So that's what we got to do, man. We got to look to the generations of old. We got to ask our forefathers that did things in righteousness how we should be doing things now, and then we should take that and do and apply diligence to it and follow after it, right? That's what we got to do. So let me get another precept for you. This is the book of Job, chapter 8, verse 8. And for inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, right? Inquire, I pray thee, of the former age. Inquire of how things were done in the olden ages, right? Because as you heard me earlier, I said it's the duty of the newer generation to surpass the older generation. Likewise, is so on the left-hand side of things, right? We've surpassed our predecessors. We surpassed our predecessors in wickedness. Things were maybe they were wicked, but they weren't as wicked as they are now. Let's be real, right? So inquire of the former age. Inquire when things were done more in righteousness. Inquire when things were less hectic and chaotic and less confused as things are now, right? So inquire of ages like that and see how things were done, man. How just go up to your father or your mother, right, and ask her how things were done. Because I would go up to my father and I would ask him, how are things done in your age? How did you do things? And he would tell me, oh, back in my day, if you wanted to go talk to a woman, you had to go talk to her and court her. Back in my day, a woman wouldn't do such and such or such and such, right? And you live in accordance with that. That's what our people like nowadays. We're not in touch with where we come from. We're not in touch with our history. We're not in touch of how things are done anymore. That's how we turned out so wicked, right? So we got to inquire the former ages. We got to learn things from our elders. We got to learn things from people that already lived life before us, that already experienced life, right? So whether it's to avoid the wicked shit that they did, Salakia from my language, or whether it's to repeat the righteousness that they did do, right? Because there's a balance. They did some good in their life and they did some bad in their life. Learn from the good and don't do the bad, right? But we can't do that if we're not inquiring of them. We're doomed to repeat the same mistakes if we're not inquiring of our forefathers, of our elders, what they did, right? So that's what we got to do, man. We got to inquire of the former things, right? We got to inquire of how things were back in the day. It might sound lame to y'all, but it's needed. We got to inquire of how things were back in the day, right? So inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to search to the search of their fathers, right? So that's what we got to do. We got to prepare ourselves to the search of our fathers, how they did things, how they comported themselves, how they basically handled themselves, how they acted, how they behaved, right? Their manners, their conversation, what did they talk about, what did they do, what was their interest, why was that their interest, right? So we can learn about them, so we can live like them, right? So we can exemplify their righteousness, right? Right. So let's get that. Let's get another precept in Psalms. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 77, verse 5. I have considered the days of old, the years of ancient times, right? So we have to consider that. That's why history is so important. That's why one of the curses would be that we wouldn't know our history. We wouldn't know our inheritance. That's why we're cursed. That's why it's a curse. Because when you know your heritage, you're proud of it, right? When you know that you come from kings and queens, you behave like royalty now. You do things behaving of royalty, but when you don't know that, you act like a commoner, right? You don't know that. You act like you're just any old body. You act like you can just do any old thing, right? That's why our inheritance is so important. That's why we got to inquire of the ancient times. Who were we? How did we behave? What was our culture? What did we do? Right? Let's go back to that, because those were the righteous days, right? Those were the days when Israel was on top, right? And if you look at it this way, we're about to enter into the days where Israel was on top again. So we got to learn who we were. That's why we're waking up now. We got to learn who we were so we can rule as we did once more, right? We got to learn who we were so we can rule and be a great nation that we were once more, if not even greater, right? And that's what the times we're about to enter into. That's what the times we're about to enter into is preparing us for. It's preparing us to be as great, if not greater than we were back then, right? It's sifting us out, right? Right? We're being tempted as gold, right? As scripture says, right? That's the times we're about to enter into. We need to look to the former ages to know what's going on. We need to look to the former ages for guidance, right? For wisdom, because wisdom and knowledge, as it says in Isaiah, is going to be the stability of the times. That's how we're going to be stable. That's how we're going to have solid foundation and not be so wobbly. That's how we're going to know what's going on. When we inquire of the former ages and inquire of our forefathers, which are in the scripts, The scripture talks about everything. Why wouldn't you want to know about it, right? When you start reading the scripture, you automatically become the smartest guy in the room, unless you're with other Israelites who are more experienced than you. But when you start reading the scriptures, you automatically become the smartest guy in the room, right? So I'm just gonna close out. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 143, verse 5. I will remember the days of old. I will meditate on thy works. I will muse on the works of thy hands, right? So meditate on the works. It should always be on your mind how the Most High saved all his prophets, right? From the afflictions that they were going through, how they got an eternal name by having faith in the Most High, how the Most High said he was going to give us riches, right? Those were the days of old, and how the Most High is not a man that he should break his oath. So if he said something, he was going to keep it, right? He's going to put us above all nations if we follow the law, statutes, commandments. The Most High is not a man that he should break his oath. So if he said that, it's going to happen. So meditate on those things, right? Meditate on how our forefathers trusted in the Most High, right? And how it was meant for them righteousness, and it was counted for them righteousness, right? And they were found righteous in the eyes of the Most High. And if you want to be found righteous in the eyes of the Most High, you got to comport, Salakia. You got to handle yourself in likewise manner, right? You got to hold yourself to that same standard and do those same things and walk in their footsteps to become a righteous man, right? And that's how we're gonna be delivered, right? We're gonna be delivered by our works. What works? Keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, which is what our forefathers that were in righteousness did, which is what our forefathers that got an eternal name did. So look to the generations of old to boost your faith. Look to the generations of old on how to act, on what, how to live your life, and how to gain wisdom, or how to infuse wisdom into your life, right? How to behave in certain situations. Look to the generations of old, because they were in those similar situations, and you could take a thing or two from them, right? So just look to the generations of old. I exhort brothers and sisters to do that. I exhort y'all to ask of the Most High of the old and ancient ways that Scripture says, right? And He will reveal it unto you, and He will let you know how to comport yourself, how to behave yourself in these times that we're about to enter, how to give you wisdom so you will be stable in these times that we're about to enter. And with that, I hope brothers and sisters been edified and some light's been shed on the scriptures, right? And certain topics, or this particular topic, right? And with that, I say Abba, and Shalom.